Hey everybody, I'm Mike with Budget Guns and Gear Reviews, and this is The Right of the People, where we use the first to defend the second every Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. So uncover your keyboards and fire up your fingers. It's time to join the conversation. Hey everybody, I'm Mike with MK Outdoor Journal, and this is The Right of the People. It is Friday, August 27th, 2021. And as usual, we have a lot of stuff to talk about. But before we get to doing that, I would like to apologize in advance. You will probably hear the sound of a fan droning in the background. I do not have air conditioning, and it's hotter than a Taliban helicopter in here. And unless you want to see me sweat, you're going to have to hear the fan. But hey, if you want to see me sweat, I guess I could start an OnlyFans page. Hey, that's up to y'all, right? I'd like to welcome my esteemed panel. We have the irascible yet lovable Squibload here. How are you, sir?
Good evening. Normally I'm up on the roof at work on Wednesdays for Rick's show, but for your show today, I'm going to be up on the roof as well, changing filters in the air conditioning.
Outstanding.
Yeah. The air conditioning you don't have, but
that's right.
We have at our factory.
That's right.
Huh.
There's a reason this used to be Budget Guns and Gear Reviews, folks. That's all I'm going to say. We got the tactical pickle himself, he who lies behind enemy lines, Calaveras 32 Special. How are you, sir?
Doing quite well. I appreciate the invite, and thank God it's Friday.
I hear you, man. I hear you. We did have Roll Call 219 with us, but he apparently had to hop out. Hopefully he can hop back in and say hello. Yeah. Who we have out in the chatteroo. Let's see. Carly Ellison was here. She was first, followed by Kingpin. Got Roll Call 219 out in the chat as well, and Warsaw Patriot also. Jacob S. is out there. 2A Dave, Gun Lover Grandpa, MKJO. MK Joe, how you doing? Who else? Jason Stewart in the house. Hello to all of you. If you're out there and I did not say hi to you, sound off in the chat. That way I can, just to make sure that we keep things. I don't want to say pretend you're talking to your grandma, but let's just not have any cussing and fussing going on. We can disagree. I don't care about that. Heck, disagree with me. That's fine. Just don't be a jerk. Because if you're a jerk, my mods will get rid of you, and if they don't, I will. I like to try to keep things semi-family friendly anyway. Pretend we're all on the radio or something, and that's about the level I want it at. We got Roll Call hopping back in. How are you, brother?
Sorry, I called the tape earlier, but I'm back. Thanks for having me.
Hey, man. Thanks for being here. Let's hop on into the first topic here. If you guys remember, I talked about was it last week or the week before, a Second Amendment case that was coming up in the Supreme Court. They're due to hear oral arguments in November. It's a case against New York State. Rewinding back a little ways, there was a case against the city of New York that was about to be heard by the Supreme Court regarding carry permits, but the city of New York changed the law at the last minute to try to moot, and successfully, I might add, moot the case. In other words, make the case not necessary to be heard because the condition that the plaintiff was suing about no longer exists. Well, the city of New York is pretty observant on what's working and what ain't, because they've decided to continue playing that game. This is a piece from BearingArms.com by Cam Edwards from August 26th. New York City playing legal games with gun license applications. A few years ago, when the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association challenged a New York City gun control law restricting where licensed gun owners could travel with their firearms, the city defended their ordinance in court until the Supreme Court accepted the case. Then the city and state stepped in to tweak the law in question in the hopes of rendering the case moot. And in April of 2020, the Supreme Court decided the case no longer had standing, though several justices vehemently disagreed, pointing out that New York had ample time to change the law, but only did so when legal action threatened to set a nationwide precedent. It appears that New York City is continuing that legal strategy, only this time they're doing it with gun permits themselves. Shows a tweet by Rob Romano, which is at 2A Updates. New, Abecassis v. NYC, hashtag SCOTUS. Cert petition filed in NYC gun license denial lawsuit that was mooted after the city suddenly decided to approve the application also reveals that NYC is trying to moot a similar case up for oral arguments next month. The Firearms Policy Coalition's Rob Romano discovered that the city has reversed course on at least 2 denials of gun licenses, but have waited until legal challenges to those denials were on the Supreme Court's doorstep. Now the attorney for one of those plaintiffs is asking the Supreme Court to accept her client's case despite the fact that he's now been approved, because the city continues to orchestrate the manipulation of judicial review of unconstitutional firearm regulations in violation of the Second Amendment. Attorney Amy Bellantoni says in a cert petition filed with the Supreme Court that the city's repeated and wrongful conduct and the Second Circuit's disregard of it gave rise to this petition, which cries out for an exercise of this court's supervisory power. In other words, New York continues to jerk both gun owners and the courts around, and Bellantoni is hoping the Supreme Court will put a stop to it. In her brief, Bellantoni lays out how her client, Ralph Abecassis, was denied a permit to keep a gun in his home and initiated legal challenges. The city fought Abecassis' attempt to exercise his Second Amendment rights, but suddenly reversed itself once it was clear that he wasn't going to give in. After petitioner's brief was fully submitted, detailing the unconstitutional analysis conducted by the district court, and just days before the city's brief was due, the license division emailed the petitioner directly and instructed him to pick up his handgun license at police headquarters. At the time of the email, there was no handgun license application pending, as the petitioner did not reapply after the city found him ineligible and unfit to possess handguns in 2019. After sending an unsolicited handgun license to the same petitioner, it deemed unfit to possess handguns and dangerous, the city moved to dismiss the appeal as moot. In opposing the city's motion to dismiss the appeal on mootness grounds, the petitioner argued that the regulations remained unchanged. The city did not cease the challenged conduct. Petitioner remains subject to the regulations. NYC handgun licenses are temporary and required to be renewed every 3 years. The petitioner will be subject to the same challenge grounds for denial 3 years from now and every 3 years thereafter. It appears that New York City is still operating on a may-issue basis when it comes to issuing gun permits, but applicants may improve their chances if they go through the expense of hiring an attorney and suing the city. Even then, applicants should be prepared to pay extensive legal fees before the city backs down in the face of potential court action. The Supreme Court is on its summer recess at the moment, but when they return in the fall, they'll have to decide whether or not to step in, despite the fact that New York City has tried to moot these legal challenges. When the court allowed New York off the hook last year, it did so over the objections of Sam Alito, Neil Gorsuch, and Clarence Thomas, who wrote in a dissenting opinion that by incorrectly dismissing this case as moot, the court permits our docket to be manipulated in a way that should not be countenanced. When New York is up to its old tricks, gun owners are hoping that the 3 justices find a 4th who agrees that this type of manipulation needs to be quashed. And I got to tell you, I am in that camp as well. I hope that they can find a 4th who says, you know what, enough is enough. I said this last year that SCOTUS should have heard this case instead of allowed it to be mooted, because it set the precedent for New York City to continue doing exactly that. And guess what they've done, folks? If even a fat loudmouth with a camera and a microphone can see it, you would think all those 9 judges in black robes should have been able to see it as well. What do you guys think? Do you think, A, that New York will continue this strategy as long as it's allowed to? And B, do you think SCOTUS will allow New York to continue this strategy? Or do you think that the 3 aforementioned justices can find a 4th who will say enough is enough, we're going to have to hear this case?
I think SCOTUS, last time knew exactly what precedent they were setting. But that's for the question I have is that's for, I don't remember exactly the timing. Was that pre-Kavanaugh? I know it was pre-Barrett, but was it pre-Kavanaugh?
No, we had a Kavanaugh at that time, I think.
Okay. So, yeah, that's where, because we still, like I've mentioned in previous shows, that's where they're still kind of a wild card in my mind because, just because they ruled away in the past, at a lower level doesn't mean they'll continue doing that now. But that's where, so they may be able to find the 4th, they may not. But yeah, that's where they need to not allow this stuff to be mooted, so that way they, the people as well as all the, the states know that if it gets to their desk, it's going to be ruled on. You can't just skirt your way around it.
What strikes me as particularly egregious about this incident is that they're not even changing the law. Remember, this gentleman, Mr. Abacussis, had applied for his permit and been denied in 2019. Now in 2021, even though he hasn't resubmitted an application, they said, no, here you go, you have a permit now. That's obvious manipulation. That's an obvious attempt to moot the case so that it's not heard on its merits. That tells me that they know that their system is bullshit and they don't want the court to rule on it. They don't want the court to hear it because they're afraid. Do you guys agree with that analysis, or do you think that it's something different?
That's New York for you. New York they're always sketchy on laws that they kind of put out and then they retract, and they're just playing the system. I mean, until things really change in New York, they'll continue to do this. I mean, you look at who you had for governor for so many years. Look at the guy before then. They haven't done anything, and SCOTUS isn't going to do anything either. They don't like Second Amendment cases. And the more this is probably them like wiping the brow, like, oof, we dodged a bullet on that one. No pun intended. I don't think if it was such a high priority, I think SCOTUS would take this up, and it's not, because 2A cases are not important to them.
M. Gabriel says Kavanaugh waffled, Barrett is unknown.
Yeah, that's where I think that's where New York will continue playing this game, because I don't think they have the fortitude to pull a Illinois or a California with the because one of the cases that's getting ready to go before it is based from a California case. So California's flat out threatened them, saying that you will rule in our favor or else. That's where New York, I don't think, has the stones to do that. That's why they'll just rather try to moot cases as they come up.
I don't think they should be allowed to. I think that they should be forced to argue their position in court and try to convince the court that their position has the merit, and that the others don't. I think this tactic of deliberately trying to render a case moot is just garbage and should never be allowed, because it sets the precedent that manipulating the court's docket and manipulating the system is acceptable, and I don't think it is. But then again, I'm not a lawyer, so I could very well be wrong.
these people have a position for life and there's no accountability. None. This is something I've complained about before, and other people have told me that, it's wrong. But I think there should be a way for the citizens, not the Congress, not the president, the citizens, to recall justices. They need some sort of incentive to do their job. If there were enough signatures going on a petition, and they meant that they were going to lose their job, they were going to be barred from practicing law for the rest of their life, whatever, something like that, you'd see them do just like New York and go, oh, wait, we take that back. We'll hear this case. The lack of accountability from these appointed officials. I mean, look at the head of the CDC. He's appointed, So as long as these people know they've got job security, they don't care. And Barrett has already shown her true colors. Somebody said, we don't know about Barrett. No, she's already shown her true colors. She's nobody's friend except her own. I wouldn't trust any of these people to do the right thing, to do what they were appointed to do their duty as Supreme Court justices. I wouldn't count on them ever.
Well, folks, we'll definitely see how this plays out. It's another one of those things that I'm going to keep my eyes on because, it's number one, I find it interesting. I know a lot of people find stuff like this boring, but I find it interesting because it's, to me, it's incredibly important to keep your eye on how things are going to develop in court with regard to the Second Amendment. Speaking of regard to the Second Amendment Foundation, beware of Biden's regulatory gun control. Public comment on the ATF's proposed AR pistol rule changes is nearing a close, and the Second Amendment Foundation is warning Americans to beware of President Biden's regulatory gun control. On June 7, 2021, Breitbart News noted that the Department of Justice's ATF was propagating a new rule for AR pistols with stabilizer braces. The rule would mean AR pistols with certain stabilizers would be brought under the purview of the National Firearms Act, thereby requiring the purchasers of said pistols to be fingerprinted and photographed, to undergo an extensive background check, to register their pistols with the ATF, and to pay $200 to the federal government in taxes. That is $200 per AR pistol requirement, rather than a one-time $200 fee. The Second Amendment Foundation pointed out that the ATF approved the sale of stabilizer braces in 2012, in part because of the benefit wounded combat veterans received from the devices. Representative Richard Hudson, Republican, North Carolina, has been fighting the proposed rule by suggesting the braces are so important to wounded combat veterans that taxing them is the equivalent of taxing the veterans themselves. Hudson observed, "The ATF has repeatedly stated the brace concept was inspired by the needs of disabled combat veterans who still enjoy recreational shooting but could not reliably control heavy pistols without assistance. Consequently, ATF agrees that there are legitimate uses for certain stabilizing braces. If this is the stance of the ATF, then the proposed AR pistol rule is not an attempt to curb gun violence as suggested by this proposed guidance, but a direct tax on disabled combat veterans." The Second Amendment Foundation is warning that the ATF's approach to regulating AR pistol braces under the auspices of the NFA is dangerous because it represents the enactment of new gun control in regulatory fashion instead of the legislative route. I've been saying that for years. Second Amendment Foundation contends the ATF's proposed expansion of NFA control will not only impact how new pistols and shotguns are equipped with stabilizing braces, but would also affect millions of existing pistols lawfully in private hands that are equipped with stabilizing braces. ATF does not have the authority to impose NFA control on stabilizing braces, and its proposed rule will threaten over 1 million citizens with prison, harsh fines, forfeiture of firearms, and the loss of the right to own or possess firearms should they fail to comply with ATF's policy change. Yep, I'm one of them. Instead, the NFA was not amended for these changes. No new laws were passed. Instead, the ATF decided to change the scope of the NFA on its own, imposing significant burdens on core constitutional rights of over 1 million law-abiding citizens. The period for public comment on the ATF's proposed rule is open through September 8th, 2021. So head on over to the Federal Register, folks, and let your voice be heard if you haven't done so. And if you have, do it again. So what the Second Amendment Foundation is talking about is exactly the same thing I've been talking about. That I talked about it with bump stocks. I talked about it with the FRT trigger thing. I've talked about it with the receiver rules. I've talked about it with the pistol brace thing. I've talked about it with pretty much any of the regulatory schemes the ATF has come up with lately. It's just an end run around Congress. It's an end run around the legislative process. You know, we have three separate but equal branches of government for a reason. The executive, the judicial, and the legislative. There are supposed to be checks and balances, each upon the other. However, when you have one branch arrogating to itself powers that it hasn't been granted by the Constitution, they no longer function as checks and balances. We have a unelected, unanswerable to us bureau making rule changes that have the force of law. In other words, we all, those of us who've passed the government class, know that in order to make a law, the elected representatives of a jurisdiction have to pass the law. They are accountable, in theory, to the voters, the people who they represent. And if the people that they represent don't like the law, they can be voted out. There's consequences, in theory, to their actions. Well, the bureaucrats in the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives are not accountable to us. They are not accountable to the voters. They have no constituents. They're appointees. They're appointed by the executive branch. And they're propagating rules that have the force of law that can put you in prison. To me, that doesn't seem like it's constitutional. To me, that seems like it is, in fact, an overreach and seizure of power that they have not been granted. To me, it doesn't seem like it's something that should be able to happen. Now, again, I've said I'm just a fat loudmouth with a camera and a microphone. I could be wrong. But to me, allowing this stuff to happen without fighting it, without doing everything that we are legally able to do, is just short-sighted. Because one thing that I know about government is that once it seizes a power, once it's granted a power, once it slides in and kind of backdoor weasels into a power, it never wants to surrender it. It's like once an agency has been granted a budget, they do everything they can to increase that budget. They never want to cut that budget. They never want to surrender any of that budget. And power's the same. So regardless of whether or not you agree with bump stocks, regardless of whether or not you agree with the force reset trigger, regardless of whether or not you agree with pistol braces, regardless of whether or not you like them, regardless of whether or not you think people should have them, or regardless of whether or not you think people should just bite the bullet, register your damn SBR, and move on. The fact is, it's not really about any of those things. It never has been. Just as gun control is never about the guns, it's always about the control. These schemes by the ATF aren't really about the guns. It's about arrogating unto itself powers that it hasn't been specifically granted by the Constitution. And that is what we need to fight. Am I off with this out there in the chat? Let me know. You guys on the panel, let me know. Am I trying to read too much into this, or am I on to something?
Those of us that inherently distrust the government would agree with you. Those that inherently believe everything the government says would, say you're a crackpot. But so it kind of depends on what category a listener falls into.
I think that the people that want to fight this, a lot of them are in the same boat as the people who don't care about this. When I hear people talk about the bump stocks or the pistol braces or something going on in the NFA or suppressors or where we're going to put a serial number or something like that, I hear them talking about it from the standpoint of, I don't want to pay the money and I don't want to lose my toy. I don't want to have to fill out paperwork and I don't want to have to wait. You don't hear them say what you just said. You don't hear people say, this is a slippery slope. This is something where if we allow this, then what are they going to go after next? This is unconstitutional. This is illegal. This is wrong. No. You hear them go, I want my toy, and I want it now, and I want it free. Okay? And those same people will go, well, all these thuds out here don't care about these plastic guns and, scary-looking guns and stuff. They're not going to get behind it. But wait, when they come after their bolt-action hunting rifle, then they'll care. The thing is, though, these people that want it, you don't have to have the same reason as me or somebody else to want it, because we all get in this fight for different reasons. I'm just saying, listen to yourself talk. You're another side of the same coin. You're the same as that thud who goes, son, what do you need that short-barreled rifle for? It's just for killing people. The same mentality is, it's my toy. And I really don't care for either opinion. It's your opinion. You have a right to it. I don't care for it. And somebody might go, who cares? Who cares what they think? As long as they sign a petition, as long as they give their money to the GOA, as long as they make a YouTube video, as long as they tell everybody that they know. Yeah, from one standpoint, yeah. But in the same thing, this is one of those, in the spirit of the law, or why are we doing this, or why do we have this? It's also the kind of, is this a right? Or is this just you wanting a toy or thinking nobody should have the toy? I just see it as the same thing.
Out in the chat, Gun Website says, it's also designed to wear the interested citizens down, to destroy the morale and make ability to remain in the fight difficult. I think that's a really good point. You have to remember, folks, that the gun grabbers, the anti-freedom people, are incrementalists. They are playing a long game. They always have been. We tend to want it all, and we want it now. We want the entire repeal of all gun control laws right this instant, shall not be infringed. That's what we want. Most of us aren't cognizant of the fact and aren't accepting of the fact that we're not going to get that all at once. That we need to adopt an incrementalist strategy as well, because that's certainly what our enemy has, and it has served them well in the past and will continue to serve them well in the future. They're quite content to take a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit more here and a little bit more there. Meanwhile, they're halfway to their goal while we're still on the starting line going, but I want it all right now. So, yeah, keep that in mind, folks.
Part of their incrementalism now, too, is also because they figured out a long time ago, in order to get that incrementalism, they have, built up the agencies. They've filled the heads of agencies with the right people that are willing to bypass certain rules and certain laws. Look at the proposed, new head of the ATF. That's where he is a gun grabber, of all gun grabbers, and has no problem, assisting with burning a building down with people inside in order to get to reach that goal. 30 years ago, if you would have tried to put someone like that in at the head of the ATF, I think it would have been even more of a battle than it is today. But because they've been willing to, piece by piece, not just get the legislation, but also put the people in place to support them, they've been able to achieve stuff that we have yet to be able to.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's if the voice of the people, which is, theoretically, our elected representatives isn't moving fast enough and doing what they want, they're going to take another route to it. They're going to infiltrate people into every aspect of the bureaucracy who are on board with the agenda. Matter of fact, there are groups right now openly calling for this. This is a piece from Politico. Activists urge Biden to bypass Congress and create office on gun violence. Survivors and advocates say they're frustrated that Biden has failed to deliver on his campaign promises to try to curb gun violence. With Joe Biden's nominee to lead the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives lacking any viable path to confirmation, gun violence survivors and activists are pushing the president to create a White House Office of Gun Violence headed by a cabinet-level aide. All right, first off, I'm going to point out, as I always do, there is no such thing as gun violence. No such thing. It is a made-up term. There is only violence. The tool is irrelevant. So let's get that out of the way first off. In a letter sent to Biden Wednesday, 4 advocacy groups complained that his actions on guns fall significantly short of the promises you yourself made while running for the presidency, and have not been a priority as 28,000 Americans died from gun violence this year. Now, of course, that 28,000 number, I'm sure, is skewed with all kinds of things put into it that shouldn't be, but I digress. Your administration is hard at work pursuing important priorities, from infrastructure reform to reducing the disastrous impacts of climate change, according to the letter obtained by Politico. But with rising gun deaths and the heightened threat of armed political extremism, you guys, us, gun violence can no longer be seen as a back burner issue. Against the backdrop of David Chipman's nomination to lead ATF languishing in the Senate, the groups asked Biden to establish a White House office to be led by an aide who does not need Senate confirmation, similar to Biden's White House Office of Domestic Climate Policy. They also called on Biden to use his political capital to urge lawmakers to pass gun laws and the bully pulpit to sell Americans on reforms. So, we can't get a director of the ATF through the Senate. Let's create a bogus made-up person that does the same thing, but we don't have to get Senate approval. Those pesky checks and balances, let's just go around them. The groups, Guns Down America, March for Our Lives, which formed after the Parkland, Florida high school shooting in 2018, Newtown Action Alliance, created in the wake of the 2012 school shooting in Connecticut, and Survivors Empowered, established after the Aurora, Colorado theater shooting in 2012, are seeking a meeting with White House officials and vowed to continue to push Biden to live up to his campaign promise. The president promised bold action over and over again, but he's not really using all of his powers to tackle the issue of gun violence, said Zinat Yahya. Yahya? Yeah, okay. Deputy Policy Director of March for Our Lives. When he wants to get things done, he does it. We've seen the infrastructure proposals, the COVID relief plan, so I think it's really up to him to get moving on these things. No, it isn't. It's up to his handlers. Biden is nothing more than a figurehead. He's a sock puppet. The man can't string 2 sentences together without a teleprompter. And even then, maybe. Biden promised to address a variety of policy issues early on in his presidency, including gun violence and immigration overhaul and police reform. But after 7 months in office, he has fallen short on these areas as he fights the COVID pandemic, sells Congress on his major spending proposals, and more recently, deals with the crisis in Afghanistan. Yeah, he's really dealt with that one. Some activists say they're worried they won't be able to spur voter turnout in the midterm elections next year because of lack of policy accomplishments on some of their key issues. Oh, I don't think that voter turnout's going to be a problem. for the opposition. I think people are going to turn out in droves to try to get rid of this, of these folks. Wow. Let's see where at. Oh, by the way, speaking of this pandemic thing, did you guys hear where Jen Psaki called it a plandemic? I saw that video clip. It was hilarious. But again, I digress. We went to bat for him during the 2020 elections because he put forth the strongest gun violence prevention platform in modern history. We need the president to take action, said Poe Murray, who chairs the Newtown Action Alliance. We want to be able to drive voter turnout on this, and it's going to be really challenging if we don't have any wins. White House officials have held regular meetings with prominent groups pushing for gun restrictions, community-based groups, and survivors of gun violence, including all 4 groups that sent the letter. Other prominent organizations, including Everytown for Gun Safety and Giffords, where Chipman works, have repeatedly praised Biden's actions. President Biden has spent his career fighting for common-sense gun violence prevention measures and has delivered, including by beating the NRA to create federal background checks and pass a 10-year ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, White House spokesperson Mike Koenig said. The president's brought that commitment to the White House, where he's moved decisively to deliver on his agenda, including through toughening regulations on ghost guns, implementing a comprehensive gun crime strategy that invests in law enforcement and community solutions, and by stepping up enforcement efforts against illegal gun traffickers. The president has spoken about the need to curb violence many times as president, including in his high-profile address to a joint session of Congress in April when he announced executive actions in April and June. He unveiled plans to require buyers of so-called ghost guns, homemade or makeshift firearms that lack serial numbers, to undergo background checks and regulate concealed assault-style firearms, as well as devoted money to try to prevent community violence. He has also called for $750 million more in his proposed budget request for federal law enforcement. A senior team of officials at the Domestic Policy Council work on the issue, though not exclusively. The 4 gun violence groups say that's not enough. The president, they say, needs to push Congress more aggressively to ban assault weapons, limit high-capacity magazines, and expand background checks, reforms he has spoken in favor of as president, and support ending the filibuster to allow legislation to more easily pass the evenly divided Senate. Be careful what you wish for, folks, because y'all won't always have the whip hand here. A White House official said that the White House has publicly and privately urged lawmakers to back the president's agenda and Chipman's confirmation. But Chipman's nomination is in peril after Senator Angus King, an independent from Maine and a member of the Democratic caucus, signaled to the Biden administration and his Democratic colleagues that he is not supportive of the nominee. King has been under pressure from gun rights groups in his state, including the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine, to oppose Chipman. And elsewhere, Biden's own administration has worked to keep in place policies that he himself opposes. In April, Biden said that ending the fairly broad liability shield that firearms manufacturers enjoy would be one of his administration's top priorities. But on Tuesday, the Department of Justice defended that law in a Pennsylvania case. It was the second case in which the Biden DOJ has defended the constitutionality of the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. DOJ didn't respond to questions. As general policy, the department defends federal laws passed by Congress, regardless of whether the administration supports them, and it deems there to be reasonable arguments for their constitutionality. But in the past, administrations have chosen not to defend some laws, such as when Barack Obama ordered the DOJ to drop its defense of the 1996 law that barred federal government recognition of same-sex unions. It is frankly shocking to see this administration reject the advice of the movement to go into court defending this law, which the president claims he wants to see repealed, said Igor Volsky, executive director of the advocacy group Guns Down America. This isn't the first time they did this. Senate leadership has acknowledged that Chipman doesn't yet have the votes for final confirmation. The Senate Judiciary Committee approved his nomination along party lines, but Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer hasn't scheduled a vote to discharge him from committee. The Senate has confirmed only one ATF nominee, B. Todd Jones, in 2013, a sign of how controversial the position is. The White House should be ashamed of the fact that those of us working on this issue every single day cannot with certainty tell you how the administration is going about implementing the promises this president made, Volsky said. That's just not how an administration for whom gun violence is a priority behaves. In other words, folks, Remember those checks and balances that I was talking about earlier? They seem to at least be partially working, except that now these people are urging the president to go around them even farther. As if going around them by regulatory overreach of the ATF wasn't enough. As if going around Congress by unilaterally, via executive fiat of the State Department, imposing a sanction on Russian-made ammunition and firearms wasn't enough. Because they could have sanctioned Russia in any way that they wanted. They deliberately chose to sanction Russia by forbidding the importation of firearms and ammunition. So, all of that's not enough. Those pesky lawmakers who are bound to you, who are in theory responsible for implementing your will, who are in theory accountable to you, well, we can't have that, can we? The peasants shouldn't have a say. Because remember, folks, gun control is never about the guns. It's always about the control. What do you think? Let me look in the chat and see what they're talking about. I haven't been looking at that for a minute. Okay, so maybe New York Outcast says, I love and respect my guns so they don't cut me or get violent in any way. Dang it. Gun website says, someone make guns up, USA. New York Outcast says, not if they don't do something about the voting machines. Oh, well, touche. Warsaw Patriot says, to the leftists and anti-gun people, Biden does not care about you at all. To which New York Outcast responds, well, he might care to play with your wife or children. Oh, to which Buck says, the wife is too old, Rob. Man. Warsaw, have no clue, have not been reading the chat, and really don't have time to read an essay. If you're talking about whether he cares about the servicemen being killed, no, he doesn't care at all. If he did, he wouldn't have been a complete incompetent boob fumble fuck, pardon my language, about this withdrawal. But again, I digress. You guys have any opinion on this? If not, we'll move on.
One thing I was going to say about it is that's for how many people vote in what direction doesn't seem to matter to these people anymore. It's, what was it, Stalin or Lenin that made the comment about it doesn't matter how people vote, it matters who counts it?
I think it was Stalin. Pretty sure it was Stalin. He does have a quote that I love, though, and it seems to be the Clintons' foundational principle. If a man's giving you a problem, just remember, no man, no problem. Speaking of Russians, this is from guns.com. Whistleblower group requests info on Russian ammo ban. A nonpartisan Beltway Accountability and Public Integrity group has asked the U.S. State Department for the full details behind the recent sanctions against Russian ammunition. Empower Oversight Whistleblowers and Research, based in Arlington, Virginia, is concerned that the ban could be a deceptive abuse of the sanctions process in order to pursue President Biden's domestic gun control agenda and restrict Americans' access to ammunition by administrative fiat. As such, they have filed a 6-page Freedom of Information request with the State Department seeking communications and documents of the events since the Biden-Harris administration took the reins in D.C. on January 20th, 2021. They specifically asked for records of communications between State Department personnel and various national anti-gun groups, such as Everytown, Moms Demand Action, Giffords, and Brady. Dang it, I'm starting to develop the hiccups. That's not good. Empower points out that the State Department announced its Russian import ban 8 weeks after President Biden announced a whole-of-government approach across government agencies to pursue gun control. While the sanctions are ostensibly to punish suspected Russian government involvement in the poisoning of anti-Putin critic Alexei Navalny, Empower notes that the State Department failed to assert any relationship between sanctioned ammunition manufacturers in Russia and Mr. Navalny's poisoning. The reasoning behind the sanctions is key, as the U.S. Supreme Court has previously held that courts can overturn agency actions under the Administrative Procedure Act when the agency's stated rationale behind the action is contrived. The department should promptly respond to Empower Oversight's FOIA request and provide the documents needed to establish whether the stated purpose for its action restricting the exercise of American Second Amendment rights was legitimate or merely a pretext to cover a gun control agenda, stressed the group in a statement emailed to guns.com. If it refuses, litigation may be necessary. You know, I think it'll be interesting to see if something turns up like a memo or an email saying, hey, how about we do this? I have to think that these people are crooked enough that they'll never release that document, even if it does exist. But man, if somebody actually did, that would be awesome. It would certainly prove that there was some skullduggery afoot.
I think about the only way you would get a document like that out would be if you had another one of those, was as in Bergdahl or something like that, or if someone like that, doing a massive, a WikiLeaks dump. I think that's the only way something like that would ever come out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think FOIA request or no FOIA request, those documents are never going to surface. And if they do, they'll be so heavily redacted as to be utterly worthless.
And whoever released them will probably get Clintoned.
Oh, yeah. They'll definitely Clinton themselves. I have to state for the record, and upon my physician's advice, that I have absolutely no evidence linking the Clintons to any wrongdoing whatsoever, and as far as I know, they are honest, trustworthy, upstanding citizens who are pillars of our great nation. Yeah. New York Outcast correctly states that ammo control equals gun control. So, you guys should know what this means, because you know what? We have come to the end of our main topics section, and some of these people are just dumb as a box of rocks. The ones, particularly the ones in these. Well, no, they're not really dumb, but the things they do are dumb. Their entire premise is dumb. But speaking of dumb. And now prepare yourself for another tale of stupidity in this episode of Moron of the Week. All right, folks. First up is this piece from War on Guns. Apparently, it is a TikTok that some female soldier had released. Give this a listen, because it's pretty spatial.
Insurrection Act. There's reasons why the military doesn't deploy within the U.S. And if they did, your little good old boy system is not going to fare well for you. Understand that if active duty military actually get deployed within the United States, that weapon is not just pointed at other people, other countries. It's pointed at you. If you do not get in your house when I tell you to, you become the enemy. Martial law. Where your rights get curtailed. You don't have all those same freedoms that the Constitution guarantees at that point. So be careful what you wish for, and stop opining about things you don't understand. Okay, bye! Have you...
So, this just has me so pissed on so many levels, what she just said. I'm not necessarily saying that she's wrong. I just think that it almost seems like she's eager for it to happen so that this person can throw down on a U.S. citizen and inflict tyranny upon us. So, Simple-Minded Soldier is the first contestant on Moron of the Week. But wait, there's more. There always is, right? In this piece from Ammoland, from August 27th, San Diego resident sentenced for firearms and silencer charges. So I'm going to say right off the bat that the guy, the fellow convicted, probably deserved it. And that I'm not supporting his actions in any way, shape, or form, nor am I supporting his opinions in any way, shape, or form. He's a dumbass himself. But the prosecutor in this case is equally, if not more so, dumb because he ought to know better. Gray Zamudio, a San Diego resident who has expressed racist and violent extremist sentiments on social media, was sentenced in federal court today to 24 months of custody for possessing a short-barreled rifle and 2 silencers, none of which was registered as required by law. Zamudio pleaded guilty on December 1st, 2020 to all 3 counts of possession of an unregistered rifle with a barrel of less than 16 inches and 2 unregistered silencers in violation of the National Firearms Registration and Transfer Act. Now here comes the dumbass part. As the government noted at Zamudio's detention hearing in this matter, there are really no legitimate uses for silencers other than to kill people. They are not used in hunting. They are not used for recreation purposes. Let me repeat this. This is the government's opinion, the prosecutor's opinion in this case. As the government noted at Zamudio's detention hearing in this matter, there are really no legitimate uses for silencers other than to kill people. They are not used in hunting. They are not used for recreation purposes. The government's sentencing memorandum notes that the circumstances of Zamudio's crimes underscore the danger that he continues to pose to the public. The memo said Zamudio is motivated by a violent ideology and appears eager to commit acts of violence against black people, liberals, and others. The FBI was alerted to Zamudio by a tipster who viewed his social media posts, which included statements about the need for vigilante militias and to crush the liberal terrorists, and that Zamudio was ready to die for his beliefs. These statements, together with the allegation that Zamudio had multiple firearms, were apparently so alarming that they led the tipster to share this information with the FBI, which then led to further investigation, including court authorization to search Zamudio's telephone. The defendant has demonstrated a very troubling violent ideology, an intent to harm people, a lack of remorse, and a willingness to illegally possess firearms, said acting U.S. Attorney Randy Grossman. So this MOTW nomination is directed at Mr. Grossman. For these reasons, he continues to pose a threat to public safety. Grossman commended the work of prosecutors Timothy F. Salal and Jonathan I. Shapiro, as well as a joint terrorism task force, including FBI and ATF agents and San Diego Police Department detectives and officers who worked in this matter. Grossman also urged anyone with information about similar threats made on social media to report it to authorities. So it goes into the stuff that he did, which, if you read it, is pretty horrifically it's definitely of a racist bent and certainly making terroristic threats. The man clearly broke the law and he should be punished. But my thoughts on this are that the prosecutors involved in the case really have no clue what they're talking about when it comes to silencers, because, you know, I don't know about you, but were I to ever decide that I'm going to purchase a silencer or a suppressor, call it what you want, that I'm not going to be using it to kill people. I would use it for hunting. I would use it for recreational purposes. I would use it for as a piece of safety equipment on my home defense firearm so that if I ever have to answer that bump in the night, I'm not going to blow my eardrums out in the process. There are definitely legitimate uses for silencers. So the Putrid prosecutors are morons of the week as well. Contestants, anyhow. And then, of course, we got Sniffin' Joe Biden as a contestant for moron of the week. Just because he's sniffing Joe Biden in the horrifically incompetent, bumbling handling of the Afghanistan withdrawal. That's the one thing I don't like about this poll thing, is if you like me forget to put this in ahead of time, it's going to lead to a bunch of dead space on the broadcast, and I don't like that. So there you go, folks. It's out in the chat right now. Who do you believe should be the moron of the week? The simple-minded soldier, the putrid prosecutor, or Joe Biden? Or at least it should be out there. There it is. So far, Joe Biden has 100% of the vote. So you guys here on the channel, on the panel, what do you think? Who should be the moron of the week? Ro?
Joe.
Ro says Joe. Pickle?
If I can get to my mute button, I'd say Simpleminded soldier. I mean, Joe has dementia, and that's where, so you know, I rag on him, but that's where the that soldier is just a what's a family friendly way of saying this? A few eggs short of a dozen.
She is a see you next Tuesday. For sure. Squib, your opinion on this matter?
The prosecutor charged this guy with making threats or with possession of a suppressor.
All of the above.
Boy, that's a tough one, man.
It's his mischaracterization of the suppressors that has him qualifying for nomination.
Oh, well, in that case, Joe Biden.
Right now we have 13 votes, 38% soldier, 8% prosecutor, 54% Joe Biden. We got 13 votes and 19 people out there, so we need 6 more votes, folks. Who do you think should be the moron of the week? Let's see. New York Outcast says Joe Biden given list 2 and trusting the Taliban. Absolutely right. Gun Lover Grandpa says the whole government. Yeah, I can't really disagree in any fashion. Joshua Prince says Joe Biden. Apparently MK Joe and New York Outcast agree. 40% soldier, 7% prosecutor, 53% Biden. Who do we got, folks? Come on. Let your voice be heard. Click the vote and sound off in the chat. Bernabe Sanchez says, let's take a poll and make a decision that doesn't work for anyone. Yeah. Joe Biden going once. Joe Biden going twice. And Joe Biden is the moron of the week.
And there we had another tale of stupidity in this week's episode of Moron of the Week.
All right, folks, we have completed the moron of the week. We have exercised our right to vote. We have talked about the topics of the day. That leaves one final thing. It's time for Roll Call 219's favorite segment, Self-Defense Shoutouts.
Yeah.
Self-defense shoutouts are not where I'm reveling in the proposition that the bad guy won the room temperature challenge by taking a dirt nap. It is where I'm instead reveling in the proposition that the good guy had the means, method, and opportunity to keep the bad guy from making him do the same. First up is this piece from KOCO.com. 22-year-old man identified as alleged robbery suspect shot, killed in Bricktown, OKC police say. Oklahoma City police have identified an alleged robbery suspect who was shot and killed Monday night near the Harkins Theaters in Bricktown. According to police, officers responded to a shooting just before 10 p.m. near the theater. Police learned that a man, later identified as 22-year-old Travis Prince, pointed a firearm at a 36-year-old man attempting to rob him. Police said that the man then pulled out a firearm and fired multiple rounds, striking Prince, who died on the scene. According to police, this is an open investigation and anyone with information should call them. Next up, this is from WSPA.com. Man shot and killed after kicking in door of upstate home, police say, from August 22nd. Spartanburg, South Carolina. One person is dead following a shooting during a break-in at a Spartanburg residence, the Spartanburg Police Department said. The Spartanburg County Coroner's Office confirmed that 29-year-old Damian Quintel Henderson of Spartanburg died after being shot on James H. Young Street on Saturday evening. Spartanburg Police Department responded to the shooting around 9:30 p.m. According to occupants of the residence, Henderson entered their home by kicking in the back door. The homeowner confronted Henderson and shots were fired. According to Spartanburg Police, Henderson was shot at least once in the neck by the resident and taken to the hospital by ambulance, where he died. Investigators say neither of the occupants of the residence were injured. And of course, ongoing investigation, and at this point, no charges have been filed. And last, but most certainly not least, Click2Houston.com's piece from, when is this from? Does it say when it was from? I don't see when it was from. August 23rd. There we go. Gun owner shoots man who pulled gun on him during fight, Houston police say. A man is in critical condition after he threatened a gun owner with a gun during an argument Saturday afternoon, according to Houston Police Department. Houston police said the shooting was reported at a place of business where the gun owner worked in the 8500 block of West Montgomery Road around 1 p.m. Police said the 27-year-old man walked into the business and asked associates about the 59-year-old man's whereabouts. Police said the 59-year-old man was outside on a work break when he and the 27-year-old got into an argument. Police said the 27-year-old pulled out a gun during the fight. Then, the 59-year-old man told investigators that he pulled out a gun that he owned and shot the man in self-defense. The man who was shot crashed his vehicle in an attempt to flee, but then fled the scene on foot, police said. Officers later found him in the area, and paramedics took him to a nearby hospital. The gun owner left the scene of the shooting, but later returned to answer officers' questions and give a statement, police said. No charges have been filed at this time as the investigation continues. So there you have it, folks. Despite what the mainstream media would have you believe, people use firearms to defend themselves all the time. There's not been a week that's gone by that I haven't had a story to tell you. That should tell you something. I've been doing this broadcast since what? December of 2017? So, I'd like to thank my esteemed panel for being here and being part of the conversation tonight. Roll call, do you have anything you'd like to leave us with? Anything you'd like to plug? Any words of wisdom?
Thanks for having me. Good show like always. Go over and check out my stuff on YouTube and Instagram and Twitter. And yeah, that's all I got for you.
Squib, is there anything you would like to leave us with, sir?
I don't like some of the shifty things the government does. I don't like when they get away with breaking the laws that they swore to uphold. but I also know that there's a lot of misinformation out there about the government. So if we're going to call them out when they violate the law, or we're going to call them out when they do something that is unethical or un-American or something like that, I think it's important to understand the facts, or maybe do some critical thinking when you're especially when you're on social media or somewhere else where people are going to hear you and you're talking about it. I'm not calling the government saints, but I'm not saying that everything they do is exactly the way their opinions are. So it's part of being vigilant, in my opinion.
Fair enough. I can't argue with you. Pickle, is there anything you would like to leave us with, sir?
Not really. I appreciate you letting me on.
Hey, no problem, man. Always welcome. And speaking of always welcome, all of you out there in the chat, you are always welcome here. As always, I am humbled and amazed that you've chosen to spend this time with us on a Friday night. You could be anywhere, doing anything, and you're here doing this. You know, it tickles me every time I do this, and it's enough to keep me doing it. So, yeah. As always, I'm going to leave you with this. Make sure that you tell your Congress critters and elected representatives what you think. Send them a snail mail, email, telephone, telegraph, carrier pigeons, bicycle messenger, smoke signals, drum messages, anything that you have to do to let them know what you think, and never, ever, ever give up the fight. I'll see y'all on the next one.